You're already legally married. Why are you trying to register another marriage? Don't you know that's bigamy? And it's against the law? Kira Olsen, startled, stepped out of the Civil Affairs Bureau, holding a just-printed marriage certificate. The man accompanying her glanced at the stunningly beautiful woman beside him, privately lamenting that he couldn't marry her himself. Miss Olsen, you're already married. Why did you hire me for a fake marriage registration? Then, after saying that the deposit was non-refundable, he left in a hurry. Kira bit her lip, still reeling from the shock. She'd never even had a boyfriend. How could she possibly be married? She looked at the printout marriage certificate in her hands. In the certificate photo, the girl appeared a bit constrained with a forced smile. The mole on the corner of her eye proved that it was indeed her. As for the man, he had heavy features and a prominent nose. His thin lips curved into a faint smile as he stared into the camera lens intently, as if they were piercing through the paper. His mystery and commanding presence couldn't be concealed, even in a black and white photo. She then looked at his name, Lewis Horton. She was certain she never met this man. What on earth was going on? Kira took out her phone, snapped a picture of the certificate, opened WhatsApp, and sent it to a contact with a black avatar. Help me figure out who this is. She got an instant reply. Got it. Only then did Kira momentarily set aside her confusion. She climbed onto her old electric scooter and slowly rode into an upscale villa area, returning to the Olsen family. Today was her older sister Isla Olsen's big day. Her future husband was coming over for the betrothal. The house was brilliantly decorated with servants busying about in an orderly fashion. A few temp workers had also been hired for the occasion. Kira parked her scooter in a corner and heard the chatter of the temp workers and servants she passed by. Who is she? She's so pretty. Shush. She's the illegitimate daughter that the boss doesn't acknowledge. Her mom was the mistress. When Mrs. Olsen was about to give birth, she showed up heavily pregnant, demanding rights, and they both delivered on the same day. That old woman has got balls. She has made up all sorts of excuses and not left the house. At least Miss Kira knows her place. She moved out in junior high and hasn't been back for many years. I wonder what brings her here today. Kira kept her gaze lowered, pretending not to hear their talk, and walked into the living room. Her mother, Poppy Hill, was waiting at the door. The woman, still elegant at such an age, anxiously pulled her upstairs as soon as she entered the house. Come with me to see your sister. By the way, did you get the marriage certificate? There was no emotion in Kira's voice. Yes, it was technically true, even though the groom was someone else. That's good. You have to remember your place. Jake Horton is your sister's fiancé. He's from a high-ranking noble family, something an illegitimate child like you could never hope for. Only your sister is worthy of him. Hearing these words, a touch of mockery flashed in Kira's eyes. Jake Horton, the legitimate grandson of the first branch of Oceanian's preeminent Horton family, pursued her for 4 years in college, only to propose to Isla on graduation day. Upon learning about the proposal, Poppy demanded Kira to immediately find someone else to marry, extinguishing any potential between her and Jake. That's how it had always been. Whenever there was even the slightest chance of a conflict of interest between her and Isla, Poppy would demand her to unconditionally give way. Because she was the illegitimate daughter, her mere existence was a sin. As a child, she was brainwashed into believing that undergoing all those hardships was a natural thing. But now she was no longer oblivious. Kira's expression was solemn as she stressed each word. We agreed. This is the last time. Poppy was the culprit. She was the one who clung to the Olsen family day after day just to see her man, and she was the one who wanted to appease Isla. Kira wouldn't ruin her own life for Poppy's sake. Today's event was to repay Poppy for giving birth to her. After that, they were even. Poppy sounded annoyed. I heard you. In the middle of their conversation, they arrived at Isla's room. The pretty girl was like a princess in her stunning dress. She was sitting on the sofa selecting her jewelry, and the room was filled with the glamorous sparkle of gemstones. Kira, dressed simply, maintained her straight posture despite the contrast. Isla greeted her upon seeing her. "Kira, what brings you here?" Before Kira could answer, Poppy interjected, "Isla, Kira got married today." Isla was surprised. "So soon? Who's the guy? Is he better than Jake?" Poppy said in a mocking tone. "Of course not. There isn't a single person in all of Oceanion of higher standing than young Mr. Horton." "Isla, do you really think she could find a decent suitor? The loser she married didn't even dare to come here with her. He's afraid that his poverty-stricken appearance will offend your sight." Isla asked with a hint of jealousy. "How can that be? Kira's so pretty. Otherwise Jake wouldn't have pursued her for 4 years. What's the use of being pretty? A shabby shoe will only match a ragged sock. Given her status, only the scum of society would marry her. Young Mr. Horton merely saw her as a toy and a passing amusement. Only you, Isla, with your status, are a match for young Mr. Horton." Kira frowned. The man in the photo, with his looks and presence, didn't seem to correspond with Poppy's description of a ghetto husband and scum at all. But she couldn't be bothered to refute these frivolous remarks. Right at that moment, Isla finished picking out her jewelry. She wanted to put on her heels but found it difficult to bend over due to the tight-fitting dress. Isla gave Kira a slight smile. Immediately, Poppy pushed Kira. "Useless girl. Always so oblivious. Your sister is having trouble. Now go on and help her put on her shoes." Kira was speechless. It was always like this. Did Poppy still think she was that naive, ignorant little girl who wouldn't know how to fight back even when bullied? Her eyes were cold, and her voice hinted with impatience. "You can help her yourself. Kira Olsen, what's this attitude? Do you think you've grown wings just because you're married now? Your husband is nothing more than a freeloader. In the end, you'll still need to rely on the Olsen family." Poppy raised her voice. "If you don't make peace with your sister now, there will come a day when you and your husband will come begging her for help. Besides, the Olsen family raised you, so you should be serving the family like a servant." At that moment, a tall figure appeared at the door. It was their father, Taylor Olsen. The man frowned. "A distinguished guest is about to arrive, and you're arguing here?" Isla remained silent, playing innocent. Poppy, however, played the victim. "It's all because of this cursed girl. She's looking down on her mother just because she got married today." Taylor fixed his gaze on Kira. "You got married? Why didn't you let us help introduce someone decent to you? Where's the marriage certificate? Let me see." Faced with this estranged father's so-called concern, Kira hesitated for a moment before fishing out the printout from her bag. However, the very next second, it was snatched away by Poppy. "Let me see what kind of loser you married." Isla asked curiously, "Dad, who's coming that's got you so nervous?" Upon thinking of the guest, Taylor instantly brightened up. He excitedly announced, "It's Lewis Horton." Kira was immediately taken aback. "Who?" Isla looked confused. "Who's Lewis Horton? Is he really important?" Kira was also curious and listened. She had some connections in Oceanion, but she had never heard that name. Taylor said, "It's normal for you not to know him because he's a mystery. Even I have never met him. He is Jake Horton's young uncle. He's only 28 years old and is now the real power holder in the Horton family." Poppy gasped. "Doesn't that make him a better match for Isla than Jake? The one in power is much better than any legitimate grandson of the first branch." Taylor snapped, "Nonsense. Mr. Horton is married." Kira narrowed her eyes. "Married? If he really was the man in the marriage certificate, then it would seem that Lewis should know what's going on." Poppy seemed disappointed. "Who's his wife? She's even luckier than Isla." Kira quickly looked at Taylor and heard him say, "I don't know. It's said that he and his wife aren't fond of social engagements." Taylor frowned in deep thought. "I'm not sure why he suddenly decided to come here today. The Horton family is the top family in Oceanion, and the one in control has a very prestigious status. The Olsen family is just slightly above average in terms of wealth. This marriage was viewed as Isla marrying up. It was impressive enough if the one in power could attend the wedding. Why would he personally show up for the betrothal?" Poppy interrupted. Isla must be so outstanding that she has caught the Horton family's attention. Isla, this diamond necklace isn't grand enough for such important guests. Let's find something more extravagant. She stuffed the printout back into Kira's hand and anxiously led Isla away to pick out new jewelry. She seemed to care more about Isla than Mrs. Olson, Isla's own mother. Kira gave a mocking smile. "Sir, the Horton family is almost here," the butler reminded Taylor. As he passed by Kira to go downstairs, he casually said, "You haven't been home in a long time. Have a celebratory drink and then go." Kira nodded. She wanted to stay and see who Lewis Horton really was. Inside, Poppy helped Isla pick out her jewelry and put it on for her. Looking at the bright girl in front of her, Poppy couldn't hide her joy and satisfaction. Over 20 years ago, if it hadn't been for Jody South, aka Mrs. Olson, she would have married Taylor Olson. She despised Jody, so purposely made a scene and gave birth on the same day before switching their children in the hospital. Now, her daughter was getting married in a grand way, and Jody was even going to prepare an extravagant dowry for her. As for Kira, who had been turned into an illegitimate daughter, she was penniless and had to marry a little punk. How the tables have turned. Poppy believed that Mrs. Olson deserved it. Downstairs, Kira lazily stood in the shadow of the staircase, staring at the entrance and waiting quietly for the Horton family to arrive. After some time, Mrs. Olson slowly walked downstairs with help from a servant. She wore a purple dress, looking slightly emaciated. She was full of scholarly spirit and seemed unapproachable. The servant said softly, "Ma'am, you're not well. It's better if you don't come down." Mrs. Olson shook her head and spoke while coughing. "No, I can't. Miss Isla's important day." They didn't notice Kira and headed toward the entrance. Kira watched Mrs. Olson from behind, her eyes filled with admiration. It was funny. Mrs. Olson, who should have the right to hate Kira the most, was the only kind person she met in the Olson family. Poppy didn't act like a mother at all and often forgot to feed Kira when she was young. As a child, Kira was so skinny and malnourished that she dug around in trash cans for food as soon as she learned to walk. One day, Mrs. Olson found her doing that and started leaving food for her in the garden every day. She kept up this routine for 12 years. If it weren't for Mrs. Olson's kindness, Kira probably would have died of hunger a long time ago. Watching Mrs. Olson getting farther away and hearing the sound of her coughing from time to time, Kira frowned with worry. At that moment, there was a commotion at the entrance. The Horton family had arrived. Taylor and Mrs. Olson greeted them at the entrance. They exchanged a few words before stepping aside to let a group of people stream in. Kira caught sight of Lewis Horton at once. He was wearing a well-tailored bespoke black suit and walking at the front like a moon surrounded by stars. His features were more distinct than in the photos, with a firm profile and strong jawline. His deep-set eyes were brooding, his thin lips were stern-looking, and his every move exuded an air of sophistication. Perhaps sensing her gaze, the man suddenly looked back at her. For a moment, their eyes met. His sharp gaze made Kira's heart flutter. Just as she was trying to observe the emotions in his eyes, he shifted his gaze elsewhere. This left Kira somewhat confused. From his attitude, she couldn't tell if he recognized her. Taylor asked with a smile, "Mr. Horton, where's your wife? Didn't she come with you?" At the question, Kira felt Lewis Horton glance at her again. He casually replied, "She couldn't make it." They chatted while walking to the living room. Jake Horton, who had pursued Kira for 4 years, followed behind the elders. Dressed in a suit, he seemed more mature and stable than in college. He didn't notice Kira and was whispering to Isla absent-mindedly. Everyone seated Lewis at the main seat and began to discuss the marriage arrangements. Only then did Kira step out of the shadows. She stood quietly there, watching the lively scene in the living room. Suddenly, her arm was grabbed by Poppy, who hissed at her, "Kira, what are you still doing here? Can't you give up on Jake? Let me tell you, he's your brother-in-law now." Kira freed herself from her grip and smirked. "Don't worry, I'm not interested in being a mistress. It was Mr. Olson who asked me to stay for a celebratory drink." Since she was old enough to understand the situation, she had always addressed Taylor Olson as Mr. Olson. Poppy gritted her teeth. That's just his polite way of speaking. You actually take it seriously? Do you really not know your place? In a gathering like this, even I can't embarrass the Olsons, let alone you, an illegitimate daughter. Are you worthy of having a seat at the table? You better leave now. Kira thought, does she ever stop? It's so annoying. Kira frowned impatiently, about to reply, but out of the corner of her eye, she noticed Lewis Horton standing up. He pointed to his phone and then walked toward the balcony, probably to take a call. Kira's eyes lit up. Fine, I'll go. She brushed off Poppy and walked out of the living room, but didn't leave. Instead, she turned toward the direction of the balcony. The balcony on the first floor was connected to the small garden outside. As Kira got closer, the man on the phone quickly hung up before fixing his ice-cold gaze on her. Kira paused. Meeting his dangerous gaze, she suddenly smiled and asked tentatively, "Honey?" A glass door separated the lively sounds in the living room. Kira was staring intently at Lewis Horton, observing his reactions. Upon hearing the way she addressed him, he became even more unapproachable. His dark eyes harbored a frosty gaze, devoid of any emotional fluctuation, and he turned to head back to the living room. Kira quickly stepped forward, blocking his way. Lewis frowned a little. "Out of my way." His voice was deep and pleasant, and his tone carried a touch of elegance, which made people want to hear him speak even more. Kira suspected something. "You don't recognize me?" Lewis looked down at her. "Should I?" Upon entering the Olson family home, he felt that an odd pair of eyes were closely following him. That gaze was open and transparent, a far cry from the obsequious and nauseating glances of others. That was why Lewis gave her a few more glances. The girl was very beautiful. Her skin was fair. Her amorous eyes and the mole at the corner of her eye were attractive but not flirtatious. Although she stood in the corner obediently, she exuded a vague, rebellious aura. And when she noticed him looking at her, she didn't evade. Instead, she looked right back at him. He had initially thought she was different from the women who threw themselves at him, but didn't expect her to be even bolder than them. She addressed him as honey. Lewis was a little impatient as he emphasized, "Miss, I'm married. Please behave." Kira was a bit stunned. This man clearly didn't recognize her, yet he said he was married. Was there a mistake in the Civil Affairs Bureau's registration? She asked, "May I ask who your wife is?" "It has nothing to do with you." His answer was short and cold. Kira took out the photocopy of the marriage certificate and placed it in front of him. "Mr. Horton, this man is you, right?" Lewis looked at the photocopy and noticed the name of the woman on it was Kira Olson. Looking up again, he mocked her. "Miss Olson, an original isn't expensive, right? You should be more professional if you're forging this." With that, Lewis didn't return to the living room. Instead, he strode off to the parking lot through the small garden. Kira ran after him, trying to talk it through, but she was blocked by two black-suited bodyguards. Kira stood her ground, calling out to him as he walked away. "Mr. Horton, this document is genuine. If you don't believe it, you can check it with the Civil Affairs Bureau." Lewis didn't stop. He got in the car and left straight away. His personal assistant remained behind and returned to the living room, where he was met by Isla. Isla had just witnessed Kira clinging to Lewis Horton but didn't catch what exactly they were saying. Seeing Lewis leave and Kira riding out on her electric scooter to follow him, she immediately asked, "Why did Mr. Horton leave? Did someone offend him?" The personal assistant smiled lightly. "Mr. Horton has some matters to attend to and had to leave early. Could you please inform the elders of the household? Miss Olson." The boss didn't reprimand the girl, which meant he didn't hold it against her. Isla immediately nodded, courteously seeing the assistant out. After setting the wedding date and finishing lunch, the rest of the Horton family took their leave. After seeing off the guests, Taylor was worried. Why did Mr. Horton leave? Did we do anything to upset him? Thinking back to how Jake seemed distracted all day as if he was looking for someone, and then to Kira's trouble-causing face, Isla clenched her fists. Her eyes flickered. "Dad, I saw Kira pestering Mr. Horton. Mr. Horton seemed really angry when he left, and he left a message." "What message?" Mr. Horton said. "He wants you to teach your daughter well." Isla bit her lip. With Kira behaving like this, will the Horton family think we're not disciplining her properly? Taylor's face turned ashen. Kira was riding her electric scooter, and just as she left the villa area, she lost sight of Louis. As she was regretting her actions, her phone rang. Upon answering, she heard her subordinate, Samuel's voice over the line. "Boss, a lot of people have been looking into who drives south is lately." Kira raised an eyebrow. "They haven't uncovered anything, have they?" "Of course not. After all, no one would ever guess that drive south, who conquered the issue of hydrogen fuel, is actually a harmless-looking young woman who just graduated from college." "Anything else?" Kira cut off his rambling. "Oh yes. I found the information on Louis Horton." "Tell me." Louis Horton is the second son of the Horton family's old master. Rumor has it that he has a violent and ruthless personality. Hence he was sent overseas when he was little. Everyone thought that the family property would be handed over to his elder brother, that is, Jake Horton's father. However, Louis Horton returned to the country unexpectedly last week, using some ruthless method to force his old man to retire and take control of the Horton group. Samuel curiously asked, "Didn't you find a convenient person for a fake marriage today? How did the groom suddenly turn out to be such a cold-blooded fiend?" "Boss, if your marital status isn't stable, it'll affect the company's IPO." Kira frowned. "Look up his contact information and schedule. I'll go talk to him again." The reason she agreed to Poppy's absurd demand for an immediate marriage was that being married as the legal representative of the company would be more favorable for the IPO. But she was married to a stranger and didn't know what plot she might be involved in. Louis Horton wasn't an ordinary person, so the best solution would be to get a divorce as soon as possible to avoid unnecessary disputes. After hanging up, Kira rubbed her temples. Things were a bit troublesome. Given Louis Horton's status, he was escorted by bodyguards when he traveled, and it wouldn't be easy to meet him. She shouldn't have impulsively called him honey earlier, which had upset him. She sighed, started her little scooter, and slowly headed home. Leaving the bustling city center, she arrived at a city village on the outskirts. When she moved out of the Olsen family home in junior high school, she didn't have much money and could only afford to rent an old house here. She had since grown accustomed to it and never moved. As she was about to reach her home after turning a corner, an old lady in her 80s or 90s suddenly sprang out from the side of the road. Kira slammed on the brakes, narrowly avoiding a collision. When she looked at the old woman, she initially thought the woman was trying to deliberately provoke an accident, but quickly realized something was wrong. Although the old woman was thin and short, she was well-dressed and didn't appear to be from an ordinary family. She had a tag around her neck, which had a contact number with a note that said, "If you find this lady, please dial this number. A reward will be given." It had to be Alzheimer's disease. Someone was missing a family member. Kira immediately took out her phone and began to dial the number on the tag. The old woman was staring blankly before, but she suddenly became active. She grabbed Kira's wrist, her cloudy eyes shining brightly. "Granddaughter-in-law. You are my granddaughter-in-law." The corner of Kira's mouth twitched. She had been single for 22 years, but suddenly she had another husband. Was the Civil Affairs Bureau doing husband wholesale these days? She found it amusing and casually asked, "Granny, who is your grandson?" The old lady racked her brains. What was her grandson's name again? "Oh right, Louis Horton." The old lady began. "His name is Louis. What's his surname?" The name she had just recollected slipped out of her mind again. The old woman was somewhat anxious. Her mouth opened and closed repeatedly, yet she couldn't form the words. "Take it easy, ma'am. It doesn't matter if you can't remember." Kira consoled her before making a phone call. Meanwhile, in a street a few blocks away, Louis was sitting in a Bentley. His face was gloomy and his underling, Tom Davis, was too scared to even breathe. "I'm sorry, sir. I failed you. I lost old Mrs. Horton." Louis didn't respond, and his chilling aura made Tom shudder in fear. Old Mrs. Horton would often get lost in her thoughts. Who would have expected that she would suddenly snap back to lucidity and sneak out when the others were all distracted? Having checked the security cameras, they found that she had taken a bus to the suburbs all by herself. This area was a bit run down, and many of the streets didn't have cameras installed, making a thorough search the only option. Just then, the phone rang. Louis immediately answered it. A serene female voice came from the other end. "Hello, I have the old lady you looking for." The air in the car seemed to freeze in an instant, and the temperature felt a few degrees lower. Everyone jumped into action. Some prepared to call the police, and Tom was tracking the source of the incoming call. Louis's eyes were sharp, and his voice was steady. "How much money do you want?" "Just kidding." The woman's voice sounded a bit cheeky. "I just want to tell you to take better care of the elderly." Then, she shared her address and hung up. Tom sighed in relief, patting his chest. What a cheeky do-gooder this woman was. Louis squinted slightly. He suddenly found the voice on the phone. Oddly familiar? 5 minutes later, they arrived at the location, but the young woman who had made the call was nowhere to be found. Only a police officer was there with old Mrs. Horton. Louis asked, "Grandma, how did you end up here?" Old Mrs. Horton replied mysteriously, "I came to see my granddaughter-in-law. She lives nearby." Louis paused and sighed. "Grandma, there's no granddaughter-in-law. Impossible. I met her," old Mrs. Horton complained. "That heartless girl handed me over to the police and just left. Right? Give me your phone." Louis handed her his phone. The elderly lady immediately wrote down the number from his recent calls in her little notebook. At last, she had her granddaughter-in-law's contact information. Kira was worried that once the elderly woman's family members arrived, they'd be overly grateful to her. She wasn't good at handling this kind of situation. So, when she noticed the police patrolling, she handed the old lady over to them and went straight home. The next morning, she got a call from her university advisor. "Kira, come to the university now." Kira didn't know what was going on, but she hopped on her e-bike and rushed to meet Professor Miller in his office. As she entered, she found Isla and Poppy there already. Kira narrowed her eyes slightly. Both she and Isla attended Oceanion University, which was the best university in town. Isla got in with her excellent grades. Kira, on the other hand, had just founded a company and couldn't run it remotely. Moreover, she didn't want to outshine Isla, so she deliberately kept her grades on the lower end and chose the least popular field of study, energy and power. Unexpectedly, 2 years ago, the concept of new energy suddenly became a hot topic. Isla immediately changed her field of study, and once again they became classmates. It was normal for Isla to be here, but why was Poppy here as well? Just as she was wondering, Professor Miller's serious voice interrupted her thoughts. "Kira, your qualifications for the recommendation for postgraduate study have been revoked." Kira was astonished. "Why?" "Your mother says your conduct and background are inappropriate and not compatible with the requirements for advanced level students." Professor Miller frowned. "Is there a misunderstanding between your mother and you? You should apologize to her as soon as possible. You have a promising future and should not jeopardize it over trivial matters." Isla sighed when she heard this. "Professor Miller, I'm sure Kira's mother has her best interests at heart." She looked at Kira. "You offended Mr. Horton, and he made it clear that he wants you to disappear from Oceanion." It took Kira a while to understand that by Mr. Horton, Isla was referring to Louis Horton. But all she did was talk to him briefly, and anyway, he didn't seem angry when he left the day before. Was he that petty? On the other hand, Isla was known to lie impassively. As Kira was considering this, Isla walked up to her and said, "Kira, this is a plane ticket that our dad bought for you. He said you should go overseas to avoid trouble. If not, even the Olsen family wouldn't be able to protect you." Kira's eyes flashed with scorn. How nice. Avoid trouble. The Olsen family was just afraid that she would get them in trouble. She glanced at the destination on the ticket. It was Argentina, the country furthest away from Kira. How much were they hoping that she would never come back? She pushed the ticket back and said coldly, "Don't bother." Seeing her refusal, Isla took out a bank card and sounded quite sincere. "Are you worried about living abroad? Here's $6,000. It's for your living expenses, coming out of my own pocket. I only have this much in savings right now. Take it. If it's not enough, I'll give you more after I get my allowance." Miss Kira Olsen, a daughter of the prestigious Olsen family, only has $6,000? Kira found this amusing, but Poppy snatched the bank card from Isla's hand. "Isla, what are you doing? The Olsen family is already merciful enough to buy her an air ticket." She looked at Kira and ordered, "You need to pack your things and leave the country right away. I've already worked on your university withdrawal." Kira looked at her. "Who gave you the right to make decisions for me? Because I am your mother. Besides, with your academic performance, further study is just a waste of time. You might even struggle to graduate. It's better to start working abroad and earn money sooner." Professor Miller immediately retorted, "Ma'am, you've been mistaken. Kira has a solid academic foundation during her time at the college." His words were cut short by Poppy. "Professor, you don't have to defend her. I know her better than anyone else. Isn't she pursuing further postgraduate studies just because Isla is? Why doesn't she get real and see who she is? How dare she compare herself with Isla?" Her coarse words left Professor Miller speechless, and then he turned his surprised gaze to Isla. "You want to do postgraduate? I remember that you didn't have a student recommendation and hadn't participated in the postgraduate exam." Isla smiled slightly and said modestly, "Yes, I'm taking a special admission route. If a supervisor really appreciated a student, they were allowed to recommend them personally. The prerequisite was that they had to be a renowned professor." Professor Miller understood and immediately asked, "May I ask who is the professor recommending you?" Isla assumed a humble demeanor. "It's Dr. South. His research on hydrogen energy oil cleaner fuel was successful. He has applied for a patent and was awarded a doctorate." Kira looked at her in astonishment upon hearing this. "Who did you say?"